Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's also kind of a sad moment for me. It's kind of my swan song in the libertarian movement, because I believe that this is the last talk I'm going to give to any conference with the libertarian movement. And well, anyway, that does not mean, however, that I am any less committed to human liberty. And, you know, I chose this word here, breaking chains, because I've found that that's something I actually have the power to do. And I'll tell you what, I never accomplished anything in politics. And I've been trying to accomplish things in politics for 20 years. Within the Libertarian Party in the USA, and maybe a little bit in the Republican Party. And I worked as a volunteer in the Harry Brown for President campaign in 2000. I went crazy volunteering for Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012. Crazy doing things for Gary Johnson and Bill Weld in 2016, all kinds of local candidates. I spent over, I just added up what I spent 2016 till now on politics. It was $100,000. And what did I get for it? I got death threats, I got enemies, I got heartache, but I didn't make the world a better place, and I didn't make myself any more happier. In fact, the opposite occurred. But when I also look back on my life, luckily politics isn't the only thing that I've done. And I really believe that I've been able to advance liberty in a limited, specific way for specific people. And I think of it as breaking chains. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about today, about how to actually make the world a freer place, not for everybody, because, well, you know, it's not necessarily possible for everybody, but for some people at some times and in some ways, and including for yourself. So, we talk here about freedom. You all have heard this song, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. But actually, I think that's a really bad definition of freedom. And so I want to start by criticizing the idea that a lot of people in the libertarian movement hold, which is that libertarianism is a thin or narrow philosophy. As long as you don't use force against me, anything goes. As long as you abide by live and let live, whatever else is fine. And I submit to you that it's not fine. That things like racism and anti-Semitism aren't fine, but also things like irrationality aren't fine. And that if you're really a free person, then baked into that concept of freedom has to be your own self-determination. You know, I get a lot of inspiration for my entire life from Ayn Rand's heroes. But what I always really appreciate about Ayn Rand's heroes is that they are the creators of their own lives, right? Howard Rourke isn't where he is by the end of the novel Fountainhead because of circumstances or because of luck. Howard Rourke does the closest thing any human being can do to what a god does. He builds himself. He is his own creation. And I think the same would be true of all the heroes in Atlas Shrugged, like Dagny Taggart, like John Galt, Francisco d'Anconia. And I take a lot of inspiration for myself, knowing that, you know, when I was younger, that I had to create myself. I had to decide what I wanted to be, and then I had to go out and make myself that. And so I think that is an essential part of freedom, or at least it is as I conceive of freedom. I do not conceive of freedom in the narrow sense of, well, nobody tells me what to do, or I don't have anything to lose, so I'll just do whatever I want. I conceive of freedom as both absence of compulsion from others, but also as the individual capacity, the individual power to create my own life, to become who I want, and to accomplish great things. And if I don't have that kind of self-determination, then I'm not quite sure any of the other kinds of things really matter. I'm not sure that a life that doesn't include self-determination can really ever be called a free life, even if nobody tells you what to do. So the first rule for breaking chains actually has to do with the chains that people are trying to put onto you by means of disinformation. Okay? Reason, Ayn Rand says this, reason is man's means of survival, and it's also your means of self-determination. We don't have fangs, we don't have claws, we have brains, and that's our means of survival. But unfortunately, if by means of misinformation, or simply if we are foolish, or if we hold bad ideas, we can undermine our own freedom. And I want to draw your attention to two recent specific cases. This photo here, which is a little blurry here, but this is a photo taken during the insurrection on January 6th in my country, the United States. Donald Trump lost the election for President of the United States in 2020, and he lost it very badly by millions of votes. But he launched, even prior to the election, what many refer to as the big lie, that somehow Hugo Chavez reached out from the grave with voting machines from Venezuela, and there was a massive effort to defraud him of the election. And many of his followers believed it because they wanted to believe it. And some of them participated in an insurrection at the US Capitol building on January 6th when our Congress was meeting to formally elect the new president. And they forced Congress out of session. People died, including, I might add, one lady named Ashley Babbitt, who was a registered libertarian from the United States. And I find this absolutely amazing. A registered libertarian voter died while attempting to overthrow American democracy because she was lied to. It's pretty amazing. She wasn't free. But nobody put her in jail. They infected her mind with wrong ideas. They took away her grasp of reality. They weaponized her in an attempted coup, and she died. That's not freedom. This gentleman over here, Stephen Harmon, tweeted on Twitter, "If you're having email problems, I feel for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a vax ain't one." He was a big anti-vaxxer, and then he caught COVID-19. Today, he has 0 problems because he's dead. He believed a campaign of misinformation, a campaign of lies, most likely promoted heavily by disinformation sources from Russia, but it doesn't really matter who's promoting it. He believed a campaign of lies. He decided not to get a vaccine that could save his life, and then he paid the ultimate price. And ultimately, he paid that price because of his inability to think critically and think rationally. He literally gave up the one thing that makes us human, that separates us from animals, our independent mind. So I want to talk just for a moment about thinking, because you can't go anywhere in life if you don't think. And this is where it gets difficult for libertarians, because we hear this, we hear trust the experts, right? So it gets difficult because we don't want to trust experts. We believe that we're independent thinkers. I make up my own mind. And I think there's a lot of merit to that position. But the problem with making up your own mind on everything is that we live in a complex world. Our world is complex thanks to capitalism having built up specialization of labor. I have no way of assessing whether the building we're in today is architecturally sound and safe for us to be here. No way. It's not that I couldn't gain the knowledge and skills to assess a building for safety, but it would take me years of study, of experience, to eventually be able to make an independent determination about that. Similarly, I've taken flying lessons. Theoretically, I can take off and land a plane, even though I once crashed one. But theoretically, I could do that. I'm no good at it, I admit it. But I wouldn't dream of trying to offer you my opinion about what weather conditions are safe to fly in or not. But I'm going to tell you what, there are a lot of people who have next to no medical training or no medical training, and who are promoting information about the COVID-19 vaccine that is absolutely false. And they're promoting it with zeal, and they're telling people not to get the vaccine. And people are confused. I want to suggest to you a way not to be confused, a way to realize that you have to actually outsource some of your judgments, because the world we live in is complex and technical questions are not something you can answer on Google or YouTube. Absolutely not something you can answer for yourself on Google. And so I want to give you some rules for free thinkers in a complex world. First, this is the Dunning-Kruger graph. You've got people who are confident. This is confidence, and this is experience, or knowledge, or competence, right? And so if you start studying something new, you gain confidence very quickly, right? And then you get up here, you're very confident. But notice you haven't moved very far to the right in the competence. You're very competent, but not confident, but you're not very confident. And this is where a lot of people get after they spend 10 or 15 hours watching YouTube videos about coronavirus. And then you've got people who are over here, who are experts. And on this one topic, I'm an expert. I'm an expert because I have a doctoral degree in the subject. I'm an expert because I spent 3 years in residency. I'm an expert because I practice medicine full-time. I'm an expert in COVID-19 because I've treated several hundred, 200 individual patients spanning about 12 or 1,300 individual patient encounters during the pandemic. I'm an expert because I published in a BMJ, a British Medical Journal Associated case reports, cases of rare complications of COVID. I'm an expert because I work on NIH studies for COVID-19 therapeutics. I've given training to doctors in Bangladesh, Bolivia, and Ecuador about how to manage COVID-19 cases. So I would submit to you that I'm over here. And I would submit to you that it would be in your interest to put a high degree of consideration on the empirical or factual claims or the recommendations that would derive from them from a guy like me, and that a guy with a YouTube channel who is selling vitamins may not be somebody whose word you should take. But there's another step besides simply assessing expertise, which is something we ought to do. If you have a lawyer, right, if you're trying to hire a lawyer, maybe you're accused of a crime, you may say, well, I want to assess your expertise, right? I did that. I had cryptocurrency stolen from me, and then it was recovered by the FBI, and the FBI was basically like, well, we're going to try to keep it. And so I said, well, I don't want you to try to keep it. But did I go to like my buddy from high school who's now a lawyer and practices real estate law? No, I went around and I asked several other lawyers who is good with civil asset forfeiture. And I found a guy from Alabama who does nothing but civil asset forfeiture cases all day. And now I'm fighting the federal government for $100,000 that they think they get to keep on some theory that the guy sold the cryptocurrency and bought a car. They seized the car, so they don't owe me anything. And I'm going to take it all as far as I can. And I know this guy is not just taking me for a ride because he took my case on a contingency. But so this is an important thing about experts, right? We want to choose the credentials. We want to look at their experience, and we want to put a lot of value in that, just like I did with that cryptocurrency expert, and just like my patients do when they have COVID-19. They don't go to their primary care doctor when they're sick enough to be in the hospital and ask that doctor to come see them. They want the hospitalist. They want a guy who spends all day treating hospitalized people. We have a problem, and this is a human problem, but it's a big problem in the libertarian community. Here's what the facts say. Here's information that confirms my beliefs. And when there's an overlap there, when you tell me something that confirms my pre-existing beliefs or my biases, I am really likely to latch onto it. And the problem is that you get robbed of your freedom because it leads you to make decisions that can get you killed. Or if any of you go to Freedom Fest, walk around in the vendors area, look at all the investment opportunities. I'm going to give you a hint. They're almost all horrible investment opportunities. But they're also almost all sold by making reference to some Austrian economics principles, and we do this, and we're going to get you outsized returns. And I would submit to you that almost none of them are good investments, and a lot of those guys are probably outright frauds, especially the ones that sell pink diamonds for $20,000 a piece. So the final thing I want to mention as we talk about evaluating experts is I just want to suggest to you that we should, as libertarians who are interested in economics and interested in people's behavior, that we should ask what people do and we should believe what they do. 96% of doctors in the United States are fully vaccinated for COVID-19. That's higher than any other group I know of. And it's very interesting because we're the ones who went through training that teaches us how to read critically medical journal articles. We're the ones who can actually evaluate the medical literature. And we're not just telling you should get a vaccine. We went out and did it. And I thought it was fascinating because we fought over who would get it first. I mean, literally, there were nearly fistfights over this. You know, people would get very mad when the next day's appointments would be all full and they didn't get a shot. So I think it's important to believe what people do. And that's why I would never, ever, ever fly on an airplane with a remote pilot. I want that pilot to have skin in the game, right? And they're everything about that. You know, if I'm buying real estate in a city, I probably am not going to do it with an advisor who himself doesn't own real estate in that city. You want to believe what people do. And you want to look at that. So you want to look at their credentials, and then you want to look at their behavior, and you want to try to come to a conclusion about that. And I think finally, I don't have a slide about this, but we should really be looking at the wisdom of crowds. I think that's a pretty common concept in economics, that we look at the wisdom of crowds and we find that when you have a large group of people and they make a decision, and they make independent decisions, they tend to point towards the right direction. So we should look at the consensus of experts. And we should look critically at it, but we should put a lot of weight in that. And I would suggest to you that if you put a lot of weight in a consensus of experts, you're going to get it right way more frequently than if you look at YouTube channels that confirm your prior beliefs. You confirm your prior beliefs, play to your fears and all of these things, you can be led astray, and then you can be robbed of your freedom, either by being, in the cases I mentioned, convinced to participate in an insurrection that leads you to be in jail or killed, or to choose to not avail yourself of something that could save your life. So, I want to just go over one more thing in this, which is we should be looking at market signaling mechanisms, and we should be looking at things like diplomas and licenses, but obviously understanding the limitations of that and the role the state has to play. But testimonials, which can be fake or can be weak, but we have some, in some professions, independently verified testimonials, experience, and then what I really like is reputation among professional peers. That's why when I was choosing a lawyer to fight my civil asset forfeiture case, I asked a bunch of other lawyers who would be the best one to do it. That's what I do when I make medical decisions for my family. Right? I base it on my own observation since I work in medicine there, so I kind of figure out who does a good job. But then I also just ask other doctors. And so I can take, this isn't available to the public, but I'm taking an informal survey of the peers trying to figure out who's the best. And then I look for documented expertise. So that's, for example, my father had renal cell carcinoma. So I wanted at least one consultation with somebody who does a lot of renal cell carcinoma. And so what I did was I looked at all the urologists in town, and I just basically searched for what publications they had made, and I found a guy who did a lot of publications on renal cell carcinoma. And I thought, well, if he's, then I was able to find out he had a good reputation. He has good experience, and I was able to feel very confident that the advice he was giving was coming from someone who was very up to date and very trustworthy. And then I look and see to what degree do different experts disagree when things are difficult. I think that's important. But when you if you have 2 or 3 people saying one thing and 90 people saying the other thing, there should be something extremely compelling that those 2 or 3 people say that would make you side with the 2 or 3 over the 96. Not just that it makes you feel good or it confirms your priors. And if something does confirm your priors, and yet you're still going to go with the 3 instead of the 96, I would really advise you, stop for a second, think about this, because you might be letting your emotions lead you astray to ignore reality. Could be a very bad problem for you. So this is the next rule, completely unrelated to the other rules. That's kind of how this talk is going to be. But I have done really well financially during the pandemic, largely thanks to a real estate boom. And I think it's really important because, let's just face it, the more money you have, the more free you are, the more self-determined you are, the less circumstances dictate your life. And I want to see people become wealthier, both as a whole, as a society. I want to see our society become wealthier, because as we become wealthier, we become freer and more self-determined, but I want to see as individuals become wealthier. And as we'll talk about in a moment, this is actually my strategy for advancing freedom in Latin America, is trying to invest in individuals, build them up, and get them to be in a position where they're financially independent and wealthy and have the ability then to be more influential. But this is basically the version of how I did it. Start by building human capital. I spent 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 years in one form or another of formal school, and it kind of sucked, and I didn't have much of anything during school, and I struggled financially and all of these things, but I made it through. And in a way, this is my kind of seed money. It's human capital. All that will just baked into my brain, baked into my body, and nobody can ever take it away from me. And then I went to work, and I actually went, I signed some contracts to work in rural places where they couldn't find doctors, that they were paying well above market rates because they had to attract somebody, undesirable jobs. And I would work like 300 days a year, sometimes 24-hour shifts, 21 days in a row. I just worked like crazy so I could get the investment capital, so I could start buying properties. And I started buying properties, And then because I had been working so much and the properties did well, I had risk capital, which meant I had money that I could really start risking. And then that has led to something very cool, which is the ability to buy properties under market value from people who are distressed. So I find people who can't pay their bills, who has property as a problem. I offer to buy it from them when they really couldn't sell it any other way. I get it below market value. Then I fix it, or more correctly spoken, I hire somebody to fix it. And then I've got this asset that produces an income stream, and it will for the rest of my life, and I've paid less than anybody else would pay for a similar asset. So it's a really great way to make a lot of money, and now I make more money doing that than I do practicing medicine. And it's this progression. And so for the young people in the room especially, I want you to consider this progression. You build human capital first. You figure out a way to make your labor, and whether that's physical with your hands or mental, you figure out a way to make it valuable, very valuable. And then you work really hard exploiting that human capital by really working and saving it. And now you're at a point where you can really pounce on things, and you can do way better than anybody can do just working 9 to 5. I think the next principle, and I think this is so important because it's building something amazing, and I put photos in here specifically to trigger people, but I'm a huge fan of Bill Gates, and I'm a huge fan of all these guys, of Warren Buffett, of Mark Zuckerberg, of Bezos, because these guys have done more for human freedom and human flourishing than just about anybody, certainly more than your average politician. And Bill Gates is especially significant in my town because he's spent millions and millions of dollars giving people in my town scholarships. He's lifting people up. But then he's also invested heavily in vaccination campaigns in the developing world. He saved millions of lives. And I think that you get a lot of these places that have been relieved of some of the economic burden of the infectious diseases thanks to the Gates Foundation, and he's really contributed to thriving. And so I see him as one of the biggest spreaders of liberty. Even though he may not talk explicitly about libertarian ideas, he has done a lot to contribute to a lot of people's self-determination, and that's amazing. Just as another example, Bezos is helping bring us to space. And it may seem like it's a vanity adventure for him, but that's the next frontier for humanity. And it's pretty darn exciting. So I think if you follow what I was talking about before, and you take it further, and you can build something really amazing, you can change the world. And ladies and gentlemen, all these guys have changed the world way more than any congressman or senator could ever hope to change the world. The real power is in business. It's not in politics. So, again, a little disjointed, sorry about that, but we'll switch topics. Language skills. I think this is extremely important on an individual level, and then I want to get into telling you what I'm doing here in Latin America and what I'm so excited about doing in the future. So, language skills open the door to the entire world in a way nothing else does. If you speak more than one language, you have just multiples of opportunities of people to make friends, of job opportunities, of business opportunities. And it can be really, really gratifying. And I found that when I learned Spanish. It's kind of a funny story. My medical school told me if I went to Puerto Rico, it would be no big deal. They all speak English there. But that wasn't true. And it was the most profitable lie anybody ever told me. So I showed up, and I was like, oh, I better learn Spanish. And so I did. And it changed my life. Here in Latin America, English is the language to learn. And there's a bright red line that runs through Latin American society that divides people who speak English from the people who don't speak English. And if you don't speak English, you're going to be very, very hard-pressed to have any level of self-determination in your life. You're going to be pressured by the circumstances you find yourself in. You're very unlikely to make much more than minimum wage. You're going to struggle to do that. But if you speak English, there are headhunters out there who will hire you to work in hotels, restaurants, call centers, at 4 or 5 times the minimum wage. They'll help you get your papers in order if you don't have papers in Colombia. It's pretty amazing to see what just the simple speaking of a language does. You're automatically middle class just by speaking a language. And I got very involved in Venezuela in trying to bring freedom to that country, and we lost. And then I had a lot of connections to people who I've grown to care about inside the country, and they were in a horrible, horrible situation. And in many cases, I was afraid they'd be killed. And I tried to get them out of Venezuela. But a lot of them don't want to go, as you heard from my friends. It's a big step. So I've got a program that I'm running. It's not with any foundation. This is just what I'm doing privately by myself, because I'm paying people a full-time salary to study English. And there are some people in this room who, I'm not going to identify them, but there are some people in this room, and then there are others who aren't here. But I'm paying 6 people a full-time salary here in Colombia. Well, actually 4 in Colombia, and then 2 are in other countries. But when they finish this program, it's an online program that's actually a full-time intensive program. When they finish, they're going to be able to land a high-paying job, or high-paying relative to what they had before. They're going to be able to get their papers in order. They're going to be able to regularize their immigration status, and they'll get out of path of poverty, but they'll have what I think is the most important element of being free, which is they'll have the ability and the power to exercise self-determination over their lives, over to make themselves the person they want to be. And they're also going to have the power to make the world a better and freer place. And they're going to be more powerful opposition activists once they've been able to do that than they would ever be just sitting under the yoke of socialism back in Venezuela. So it cost me less than $10K to pay him a salary for the entire program, pay the tuition in the program, and it's literally the best $10K I think I could ever spend. You know, I can't get an ROI like that on any real estate investment. It makes me extremely happy, and you know, right now we're in the initial phase, right? I've got 6 people. I'm going to see how it works. I'm going to see if I'm successful, and then hopefully I'll expand it. And as my business expands in real estate, I'll have the ability to expand this project of mine. And I think it's important to link these two, because immigration is also breaking your chains or breaking someone else's. If you're born in Venezuela, you are born with chains on your wrists and something on your neck. If you're born in Cuba, that's the way. If you're born in Nicaragua, that's just the way it is. And I think in these cases, you're never going to live a life proper to a human being where you create yourself, where you become the person you want to be, where you do the things you want to do. You will never live that under the yoke of socialism or totalitarianism. You will live that if you go somewhere free. And so I always tell people from Venezuela, please, please, please get out. And to those of you who are here from Venezuela, please, please, please don't come back. If you need help staying in, don't go back. If you need help staying in Colombia, I'll help you. And also, for those, thank you. Thank you. So, and for those Venezuelans in the audience who are interested in acquiring Spanish citizenship, I have some ideas. Let's talk. Maybe we can figure something out. This gentleman, some of you know him, some of you don't. He's actually the person I consider to be my greatest achievement in life. And Jomar, you know Franklin. Franklin went to grade school with you, right? Yeah. So Franklin Camargo is a Venezuelan activist from Maracay, where Jomar is from. And Franklin was in medical school in Venezuela. And in 2019, there was this concerted effort to kick Maduro out of power. And we were all very excited. They were all very excited. And the medical school brought all the students into one room and basically started subjecting them to an indoctrination session. You must support Maduro because he's giving you an education, et cetera, et cetera. And Franklin stood up and opposed this. He said, no, Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is the tyrant, and I won't support Nicolas Maduro. So he was summarily expelled from medical school. Then he started getting threats, and he was accused of terrorism, and he had to go into hiding. And Vente Venezuela, which is a political party that I support in Venezuela, Vente Venezuela publicized his case, and through the contacts I already had, I was able to get in touch with Franklin, and I said, you know, screw these Maduro guys, I'm going to make sure you become a doctor. So what I did is I sent him Bitcoin, because I didn't actually have at that time a way to get money into Venezuela. Now I do, but at that time I didn't, so I used Bitcoin. And he got enough money for a plane ticket. He got enough money to have in his pocket, because he already had a tourist visa to the United States. He had enough money in his pocket so that he was credibly going on vacation. And he took a vacation to Miami. And I went there and met him in Miami and hired him an immigration lawyer and got him enrolled in English classes. Actually, he wanted to go to Salt Lake because that's an area where he had more connections because of his church. And he started washing dishes in a kitchen while he was learning English. And he did really well with that. He got his asylum approved, and actually he's able to get the rest of his family in the country too. So his mom, his dad, and his brother are all there. And since then, they've started a family business. They make tres leches cake and they sell it to Mexican restaurants. And if you ever go to Salt Lake City and you go to a Mexican restaurant and order tres leches for dessert, it'll come from Franklin's family. And I'm so proud of him and what he and his family have accomplished. But then was really cool, on my way on the flight down here, I was actually editing his college application essays because he's applying to go to BYU. And he'll go to BYU. I have no doubt that he'll get in. And he'll do really well because he's very smart and hardworking. And then I have no doubt that he'll go to medical school and he'll fulfill his dream to be a doctor. It'll be delayed because there's no way to kind of take the equivalency from Venezuela halfway through and just jump into medical school in the US. And meanwhile, he'll be a US citizen. His life has completely changed. But since he's been in the United States, he's made over 50 television appearances on Spanish language television criticizing the Maduro regime. And he's been one of the loudest advocates you could have within the borders of the United States for the freedom of Venezuela. And I would submit to you that the decision about whether Venezuela will be free depends more on what happens in the United States than it does on what happens in Venezuela. So, in closing, I may be done with politics, and I think I'm done with the libertarian movement as a formal movement, but I'm not done advocating for freedom, and I'm not done breaking other people's chains, and I'm not done building my own life into the freest life I can have. I'm not done creating myself into the freest version of myself that I can be. And at the end of the conference, I will no longer be on the board of LI, but I know that we're going to part ways as friends. And I want to tell Jacek and Ken and all my other wonderful friends from LI that we're still friends, and that I love you guys, and that I can't wait to see all the great things that you guys do in the future. And so thank you, because LI has been a wonderful experience for me, and I've made so many wonderful friends. And we've got many, many more projects to do. We've got many, many more fights to fight. But we're going to make this world a freer world. And the future really is libertarian.
Yes.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. That really means a lot.